May the words from my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many people?" Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Good morning. I must confess to all of you that growing up, I did not learn how to cook meals in the kitchen. The kitchen was off limits in my childhood home. That was my mother's realm, and no one was permitted to be there making a mess. She did all of the cooking unless there was something required to be grilled on the barbecue. The barbecue was my father's realm, and no one was permitted to be around his barbecue grill. But I was allowed to watch and to ask questions. And when I went off to college and graduate school, I was fortunate enough that we had meals prepared for us. We were not allowed to cook anything in our dormitory rooms, no hot plates or coffee pots. We didn't even have that wonderful invention of a portable countertop microwave oven. What was that thing anyway? There was nothing like that back in the good old days. But that changed, of course, when after graduation, I was faced with the fact that now I was responsible for my meals. But being single, fresh out of school, and on a very meager food budget, which basically whatever was left in my paycheck after I paid for everything else from rent through all the other items, I ended up having to make do with simple things like simple sandwiches and the like. Nothing that required cooking. But I was okay, and life went on. Fast forward years later, I found myself married and with 3 small children. And there was this time when my wife needed to be away for the evening, and I was appointed to take care of making the evening meal for the kids. The terror in their faces was enough. But it was easy. The menu for the evening was grilled cheese sandwiches, one of their favorites. And I assured her that I had that covered. And she assured our kids that he can do it. And to myself, in my engineering brain, I had already formulated a marvel of efficiency for preparing that meal for my children. Because after all, what is a grilled cheese sandwich, really? 2 slices of toasted bread with melted cheese in between, right? Easy. So, what did I do? I toasted the bread slices in the toaster, placed a slice of cheese between the hot toasted slices, let the thermodynamic principle of energy and heat transfer melt the cheese, and presto, a grilled cheese sandwich the efficient way. The looks I received from my children when I served that meal. The oldest one, who was about 14, pointed to the plate and asked, "What is that?" The middle child echoed the same question. I told them, it's a grilled cheese sandwich. And in unison, they informed me, with my 9-year-old daughter probably being the loudest, that is not how Mommy makes them. Clearly, I had failed. Well, after that disaster in their eyes, the next time I ended up having to cook dinner for the kids because my wife needed to be away that evening, the decision was made that the dinner would be mac and cheese. And everyone, including my 3 loudest critics, agreed that even I could do that one right. He just has to follow the directions on the box and everything will turn out fine. Or so they thought. Yes, it wasn't that difficult. I followed the instructions on the box, and my 9-year-old daughter, Erin, she was 9 at the time, was right there by my side supervising me, making sure that I would not come up with another disaster for her and her brothers. And while things were going well, we reached a point where I hit a challenge in the instructions. It was a step about adding 3 measures of butter to the mix. Now, I hadn't actually read ahead on the instructions. I wasn't prepared for the challenge. And so as I found myself trying to rummage through the kitchen drawers and probably talking out loud to myself about where are the measuring spoons, my 9-year-old daughter, Erin, looked up at me quizzically and asked, "Don't you know?" The gospel account from John this morning speaks to the need for quiet time with God, and yet knowing when to respond to the call to minister to others. In the case of this account today, Jesus encountered a multitude of people who had followed him along the shore, and he decided that he would not pass up the chance to address the needs of the people following him that day. Although it was quite possible that many of the people in that multitude were just there hoping for a chance to see something new and entertaining, Jesus was willing to care for them all and to feed them as a demonstration of God's goodness and love, and to teach his apostles how to minister and work as a team in a situation that might seem hopeless. The apostles were probably overwhelmed by seeing that large crowd approaching and hearing Jesus asking them where they would buy enough bread to feed such a large number of people. We can hear in Philip's voice the surrender to the practicality of the situation. Philip had calculated that it would take a very large sum of money, and they did not have the funds available to them. But Jesus used the opportunity to teach his disciples how they could feed the people. There would be enough food, enough resources, if they would just look for them and place their trust in him. With his support and his miracle of multiplying the loaves and the fish, the apostles had more than enough food to feed at least 5,000 people with plenty of food left over. And we can view this event to be a sign that Jesus will always provide in abundance for our work in his name. What is interesting is that of all those people gathered that day, some 5,000, maybe more, only one young boy was found to have some food with him. Was he really the only one who had been prepared? Or was he the only one willing to reveal and share what little he had? A barley loaf of bread at that time was considered a meal for a very poor person. And the size of the loaf is not what we would envision today, not the loaf of bread in the plastic wrapper on a shelf in a store. It was more like the size of a muffin. And those 2 fish were probably tiny, easy to pack and to carry, perhaps dried or preserved. Not a fish that we would think of today that would stretch the length of a dinner plate. This was the traveling meal of someone with very meager means, and it could have been all the food he would possess. The Apostle Andrew, surveying that small meal, had already resigned himself to not even consider it. He could not see any value in such a small meal compared to the number of hungry people on the mountainside that day. It can be easy to become overwhelmed and think the situation is hopeless, that nothing can be done, that you cannot solve all the problems. And that is where the beauty of the strength of faith and community comes into play. No one of us alone can fix all the problems. No single church parish alone can fix it all. But when we come together, pool our resources and talents, we can make a difference. Jesus taught his disciples that in this event that we heard this morning. They took the meager resources they found to him, and he provided what was needed for all. Jesus addressed what was no doubt the chaos of all of those people, thousands of people gathering around him, by exuding calm, having the people sit down and relax on the grass so they would be put at ease and know that someone was taking charge of the situation that day. And I think by doing so, Jesus also calmed his apostles. A calming presence, combined with the elements of rest, food, words of prayer, and encouragement, gave the people more than enough of what they needed at that moment. When I was fumbling about in the kitchen that evening, trying to find those measuring spoons, the type that I thought might be on a ring somewhere in one of those drawers, my daughter Erin, who was 9 at the time, looked up at me and asked, "Don't you know? The butter is already measured." And I looked at her quizzically and asked, "Well, how can that be? I haven't found the measuring spoons yet." She then pointed to the stick of butter, still in the paper wrapper, and said, "You just cut it at the blue lines on the wrapper. There are 4, and you only need 3. Genius. Who knew the manufacturer thought ahead to my situation and put measuring lines on a stick of butter? And I asked her, "So how did you know about that trick with the butter?" And she looked at me very proudly and said, "Mommy taught me." And I also learned that evening how much butter there is in the mac and cheese dinner. No wonder that's described as a comfort food. Every time my family gathers together, the stories have to be told of my inadequate cooking skills, about the time I made those grilled cheese sandwiches. And I have to endure the laughs and the comical looks, but it is actually okay with me. Let them tell those stories over and over again. At least I know they will continue to remember me long after I am gone in those stories. We continue to hear and share the amazing story of how Jesus and his apostles fed thousands of people with very little food. A story that conveys a lesson about faith and working together to care for others. A story that we can put into action each and every day. And we do so right here at Christ Church Cathedral with our 5,000 Club ministry, with the Saturday bagged food giveaway, and the Queen City Choir ministry and the hot meal that is served. The local Episcopal Church that I helped support as a supply priest this past month is conducting a food drive and an essential cares item drive to support their local food pantry in the town, who is experiencing requests far beyond their current capacity. Every effort, no matter how small or large, combines to create a much-needed effort for the greater good. The answer is not to throw up our arms, say it can't be done, and turn away. The answer is to do whatever we can together, put something into motion, and work to let it grow. Whenever we may find ourselves falling into despair, feeling the situation is hopeless and there is nothing we can do, we just need to recall the apostles probably felt that same way on the mountain, and yet Jesus made everything okay and for them and for everyone that day. By retelling that story down through the ages, we remind ourselves and teach people new to the faith of the healing and miraculous power of Jesus present in the world. We need to know that we are the people of God, God who loves us so much that he gave his only Son to secure our salvation for us. We need to know that he communicates with us every moment of our lives, and he wants us to communicate with him. He is never going to tire of hearing from us, never going to be too busy to care or to spend a few moments with us, never going to cause us to think we are imposing on his time. He wants to be there for us in good times and in the bad times. But what are they among so many people? Andrew asked. And as Andrew and his fellow apostles learned that day, by placing their faith in Jesus, they were the start of everything they needed to care for all of the people on the mountainside that day. Amen.